What's he going to say about CrossFit?
Do you want me to speak on that point?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's where the waters get a little bit muddy for sure. And I don't think programming is going anything against the CrossFit believes in, because if you listen directly to what Greg Glassman has said, it's that the goal is generalized fitness, so they want you to be good at everything, but in order to attain that, you need to do, in my opinion, you need to do some sort of programming to focus on those weaknesses. And he said the same thing numerous times. He says you need to find the things that you suck at, those are his words, and you need to focus on that and pursue that headlong until that becomes one of your strengths. Once it becomes one of your strengths, you quit focusing on that much, and then you go to a more generalized program. So I think there's room, my answer in other words is I think there's room for programming within a generalized fitness program. I think once you build it up to where you're better at it, you can stop focusing on that so much. Because once you focus on something so much, or specialize in other words, you start to sacrifice other realms of your fitness. And that's kind of what you want to avoid.
Okay, so what you're saying to me sounds like a con. Because, I mean, there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
General fitness, but because you're having general fitness, you're sacrificing being really good at one thing.
Definitely, absolutely.
So what that sounds like to me is CrossFit wouldn't be the ideal thing for an athlete that specializes within a certain sport. So let's say if you're a basketball player, you
right.
probably wouldn't benefit. I mean, you benefit from CrossFit because it's going to land overall, but why do something that's going to help you in other areas when you can focus specifically on your sport? What do you have to say about that?
I like this. This feels like the news. I talked about that too in the presentation, which you say you read. But
I did. I read it.
Okay. We'll say it for the public. I think it depends on the sport. It depends, because CrossFit covers so many different fitness parameters. The more generalized of a sport that you play, so let's take an athlete who plays football. Football is a very, in fitness terms, it's a very general sport. Obviously, you have very specific goals to accomplish in that sport, but if you're talking about, strength, agility, power, muscular endurance, that kind of thing, along with the different energy models of human metabolism, football covers a lot of that. Okay, so it covers a very large area. And if you're talking about CrossFit's application of that, it's going to apply to that athlete, a football player, much better than it would to, let's say, a power lifter. Because a power lifter, it's not really power, it's strength. They're doing strength training. If you're talking about a 1-rep max bench, yeah, if you have him go do CrossFit and work on a whole bunch of different things, it's not going to affect him the same way as it would somebody who plays football, because he's literally just taking a bar from here to here and pushing it back. That's a very, very specific domain, especially in terms of energy metabolism. That's a very short, high-intensity creatine phosphagen system that you're focusing on. You're not even touching the other two. So if you take that athlete and have him do a CrossFit, he would be negatively impacted more than, say, a football player. I think a football player, a basketball player, athletes like that, they will respond much better to a CrossFit program. But yeah, to answer your question, it could definitely be a con. The more specialized your sport is across those parameters, the more I think CrossFit would not be beneficial during your training season. I think it's a good off-season training program for everybody. Because the more, as we know, especially with youth, the more you specialize in something, the more, you could say, damage it's going to do to your body. Okay. So that's one of the things we're focusing on in youths these days. It's just not specializing in a sport too early, because that starts to load your body negatively as you're growing, and these changes are happening in your body.
Sweet.
So that's my answer to that.
You just ranted on. I forgot what I was going to say.
Let's see. We went from specialized.
Okay, I remember now. Okay, so you're, because it's general, you're lacking specificity, or the said principle, specific adaptation to impose demand.
Beautiful principle.
You like that, Bill?
Yeah, I haven't
now one of the things that I kind of agree, disagree is, where's my head at? The idea of focusing on a weakness. Now, I'm not opposed to that idea. But what's the guy who came up with CrossFit?
Greg Glassman.
Greg Glassman. Because I watched a presentation that he gave, and he said basically you want to make sure that everyone has generalized fitness. That way when the poop hits the fan,
Good word.
If you have one guy that can run like 20 miles, but he has to like lift something,
right,
and then the guy that's really strong and he has to run 20 miles and everything's disorganized, it's just going to be a big cluster.
Yeah.
Now, I agree with that. I think that is true, but at the same time, I think that we're self-organizing people. And what I mean by that is, would you rather have five people on a basketball team that are generally good at each position, or have a basketball team where one guy's the bomb at center, one guy's dope at guard, and one guy's the best at point? Because I think if you were just playing them all there, they would self-organize within that system. And then, does that make any sense?
It does, yeah.
So, do you have anything to say about that, or am I just...
I think that's kind of overlapping with your last question. It sounds like you want a more specialized. It sounds like you're saying the more specialized the better, because if we can specialize, we're going to fly in here. Because if we specialize within each of those positions, you're going to get better results as opposed to if you had somebody who's generalized in that position. Which to me, it sounds like kind of the same argument, but I was going to say something else on top of that. Just in his example that he uses on the battlefield, because he trains a lot of law enforcement officers, firefighters, military, they don't have a choice. That example, they don't have a choice. You're talking about a choice where a coach can say, I want this person there, I want this person there. If you're in the middle of a firefight, you don't have a choice. So that's a different scenario.
What I'm saying is, in the middle of a firefight, I think that we can still self-organize. There's going to be a chance that we can. I just think that, assuming that we're going to be in a firefight where we cannot self-organize, I just think the probability of that situation occurring, I don't know how much higher that would be. Because if there's a firefight and we're like, oh, I still think that it's like, you run really far, go run. Okay, I lift up, I'm going to stay here.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, but I think both of us are just speculating right now. And I don't have anything to go off of because I've never been in the military, but I can say from people that I know personally that have been in the military have said it's one of the better workout programs and it prepares them well, as well as firefighters, law enforcement officers, and mostly what Greg Glassman has said. He has a lot of interaction with large organizations across the country, even across the world. And the feedback that he has gotten has been, in other words, it's prepared us very well for what we do on a daily basis, and we like it better than it's better than the alternative.
I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in here because we're just having a conversation back and forth. Just so you guys know, I do like CrossFit, and I think it's an awesome thing, and I agree with everything that you had to say right now. I think that it gets kind of, a lot of times I'll talk to somebody and it's just like, CrossFit's flawless and there's no fault to it. And anytime you say anything that doesn't lend to it, it's almost like you're a little bit more, I guess, liberal in your approach because you can actually acknowledge some of the shortcomings of it. Yeah. But how about this, Bill? How about you break down what CrossFit is to like somebody who's just 50-year-old, never even set foot into a gym? Can you just paint a picture of what the heck it is? Because I know you said constantly varying function. I mean, dude, they don't know what that is. Right. Make sense of it. Okay. Explain this to me so I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard. Greg Glassman talks about this, and he says the best way is just have them do a workout. Really, I think that's the best way. But yeah, it's just taking. You're working hard in a short period of time frame, so it's different than conventional wisdom that says you go into a gym, you do 3 sets of this, you do 5 sets of that, and you're kind of hopping around from machine to machine. So the functional movement aspect of it means that there's not a lot of machines involved at all. The gyms themselves are called boxes because of that. It's basically just 4 walls and a bunch of free weights. Free weights are more functional in their perspective. So for that 50-year-old person, it would be coming in and doing a few functional exercises that are usually timed, and the time component, make sure that you add that high-intensity parameter. So,
can you give some examples of what a functional movement is, specific examples?
A specific example would be a squat, a deadlift. Some people might not be familiar with that, but even just an air squat, whenever you have a seat. That was a high-intensity, high-volume functional air squat.
Just so you guys know too, I do think that those movements are the best movements, and that's one of the major reasons why I like CrossFit, because they stick to those core, foundational, functional, compound movements, which I think most people will benefit from.
And that's what they build their program off of, is what are the most efficient, and by efficient they define that as powerful expressions of human movement. So the thinking is, if you focus on those movements and you become proficient in those movements, it translates, or it lends itself very well to doing other movements that you're not focusing as much on. Because if you think about just physical prowess, there's so many different things you could work on. If you wanted to work on your physical fitness, you could you could do anything and everything. So developing that general physical preparedness is all about figuring out what's in common with all of these movements. And the commonality that he's found is that they're efficient movements. So he kind of focuses on those efficient movements and has people do that. So it could be the deadlift, it could be squats, Olympic lifting, there's a lot of that, gymnastics movements.
About the Olympic lifts, some of the criticism I've heard about CrossFit is the high volume of the Olympic style movements. So the clean, the jerk, the snatch.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?